Hello everyone, welcome back to Realms Remembered. This is Michael T. Bradley. Let's talk today about the Alabaster Staff by Edward Balme, or Balme, not sure how that's pronounced. This is part of the Rogues series, the first one that we're reading in there. This is an interesting book to talk about. Not necessarily an interesting book, not a bad one, but not necessarily interesting, but this is a very good book to talk about, I think. There are a lot of good things to kind of dissect here. First of all, I want to point out one of the acknowledgments. Thanks and applause go to Phil Athens for telling me it wasn't good enough. Reading that made me like the book so much better because it gave me more reason to like Phil Athens. I see a lot of things in here that I could tell went through a first revision and just needed to be cleaned up. Let's talk about the things remaining that need to be cleaned up. There's this thing. The first chapter starts with, so we start out with a prologue where Tiamat fights Gilgam, a local god, and Tiamat wins, and Gilgam, or Giljam, or however the hell that's pronounced, is murdered way back during the time of Troubles, one of the gods that fell by the wayside, apparently. All fine and good, and it ties into the climax, and the plot of the story, really, in a lot of different ways. Fine. Then our first chapter, about half of it is spent upon this thief entering the city and all these things that he does to secure a pair, which he then gives to our main character, Kersen, whose name I could not pronounce for most of the book, and then at one point it's given a phonetic pronunciation. I was like, oh man, wish they had done that sooner. Elaine Cunningham figured this out with whatever her character's name was over in the Mage Hound stuff. Anyway, the entire book, I kept waiting for this thief to come back, because it's a rogue series. There was like a good 5 or 6 pages right at the very beginning spent on it, and no, that character never comes back, doesn't play any bit into the plot, just kind of sets things in motion in a way. This would be fine if throughout the entire book we got glimpses of different thieves doing different things that set other parts of the plot in motion, but we don't. It's just this really odd, out-of-place, ratchety way to start the book. It's well written, it's not unenjoyable, but it doesn't belong there. This is obviously a book where when things like that are left in after a final edit, you know it probably went through quite a bit of editing. Which isn't to say that Edward Balme is a bad writer. Most of the stuff in here is written very well, and in fact, even though I would say the first third or so of the book is the weakest, I still stuck with it because I felt like this book's going to find its feet at some point, and it did. The problem is, about halfway through the book, maybe more like 3/4 of the way through the book, I realized, oh, this is what this book wants to be. Why wasn't it this from the beginning? And I really feel like either it was this different type of book, and they made it into what it felt like it wanted to be, or vice versa. What it feels like the book really wants to be, to me, is this kind of non-stop back alleys action where you don't know who to trust, and every 5 minutes kind of the people that you trust turn out to be the people you're against, sort of thief adventure. Which is great, but it should have started with that. It should not have started with everything calm and complacent and then slowly going down the rabbit hole. Instead, we should have gotten little flashes back to that, and I understand why we need that opening bit, why we need Kersen before she's embroiled in all of these machinations, because we have to, because at least what I assumed is that Balme is trying to show what different rogues do for kind of a daily thing. You know, they aren't necessarily all on adventures picking locks all the time. Here's a different flavor and a different way you can go about playing a rogue, which again is all fine and good, but we could have done that all through quick flashbacks and started once we're closer to the area of the thieving actually taking place, and the like, holy crap, who do I trust, what's this now, all those sorts of things that come into play during the book and which flow really well. Also, Balme, great action writer. We don't know this until like the very end, because the prologue's a little choppy, it's not great, it was obviously probably one of the first things that he wrote, and then through most of it there's just not that much action going on unless it's kind of off panel because Kersen's hiding from a lot of it, she's not a great fighter. Which again is fine, but it seems sort of a shame to put Balme, who's such a good action writer, on a project where there's not going to be that much. Few little side things to mention here. Horrible cover art. Just terrible sort of what the hell is wrong with the girl holding the staff, who I assume must be Kirsten? And the other one just doesn't look very feminine at all. And then all the action's going on in the background. Like, don't you want to be dealing with whatever the hell's in the background there, rather than, like, these two women standing and, I don't know, it looks like they're part of, like, a Kiss concert or something? Yeah, it's just, it's very frustrating. Bad cover. The back is written very badly. It's like, she didn't want to do this, she didn't want to do that, she didn't want to do any of these things. But she did. And it's like, so our main character's a moron? I mean, that's how it makes it sound. Also, Balme does some stuff with dialogue in here that my assumption is Athens told him to make his dialogue for different characters stand apart more, and so he took that as this, like, well, screw you, I'm gonna do this then. Because the dialogue just feels a little forced at times, in a way that we're not used to, except for, this is one of the best 2 sentences ever. How dare you? I would mete out great punishment for such temerity, had I not already given you said sufferance. Just think back to all the times in your life you've heard that sentence. It feels like I'm saying a lot of negative things, and I don't want you to take away from this that I dislike the book, because I really did enjoy the book overall. It is a good read, and the sections that feel like they were part of the final draft are really well written. And we kind of randomly have Harper show up at one point, which is a little odd, but whatever. But for the most part, it's a good book. I don't have anything super negative to say about it, but I think it's interesting that you can, in many ways, much like in City of Splendors, you could pick apart what was Greenwood and what was Cunningham. In here, you can pick apart what was Balme finding his voice in this world and what was more a final edit. I'm kind of frustrated because I don't think he wrote anything else for the Realms, and he seems like he could have been a really, really good writer if he had just been given something that suited him a little better. Hey, let's talk about the book that is the cause for all of this. Yes, the book that I read in the Realms that I absolutely loved the first time I read it, and made me want to come back to it, and then, you know, Phil Athens is the Water... oh crap, totally blanking on it now. The Scream Stone's the one that we have left, that trilogy. Watercourse, the Watercourse trilogy. Was what made me think that I wanted to do this entire project. But the book that really hooked me on it was Twilight Falling. So now, what, 4 or 5 years later, now that we're at this point, not that I've been doing these reviews that long, please, but that's about when I read it. What did I think of it? It's still amazing. It's still just so incredible. The few things that are odd reading it now are, I don't know how he could have, but it feels like more of the Sembia stuff, more specifically, when I say that I mean stuff from the other Sembia books, should have been cut out of it. It very much feels like the first third of the book is him cutting all ties to that. But especially his relationship with Tazzy is so intertwined with Erebus's character that she shows up not necessarily in person, but in thoughts a couple of times later, and it feels right, but it also feels like we've kind of strayed away from the Gateway to the Realm series so far at this point that I feel like we just shouldn't be mentioning them anymore. Yet, I still find myself hoping that Erebus and Tazzy get together eventually, which I'm sure is stupid, but I have to wish for it. The ending! Wow, when I first read it, totally did not understand what Erebus does at the ending. And I'm not going to spoil it because I want every single one of you to read it, because I still absolutely love this book. I think it's the best book that we've had come along so far for what it is. I mean, like, I think Athens' Watercourse is probably better in some ways. I think some Cunningham stuff is better in other ways. Azure Bonds maybe in some other ways, but this is the one that really speaks to me. This book knows what it wants to be and knows how to achieve that from the beginning to the very last page, and just really twists the knife in ways that are shocking. And really attempts to be literature at times, I think, in a way that only Cunningham and maybe Athens, yeah, probably Athens, have attempted to do so far. Jack is a 17. What the hell does that mean? It's so powerful, though, and I'm like, you know, by the end of the book, I'm like, yes, Jack is a 17. I totally see that. I don't know what it means. Dracek Riven has become one of the most interesting characters ever, even though, like, if all you had ever read was Salvatore, and then you read this, you would be like, oh, he's just an Entreri ripoff, but he's so not. Oh, also, Road of the Patriarch. That also attempted to be literature in a way that really nothing else, not much else has in the Realms canon, I think. I know that Kemp has said that Athens kind of had to fight for him to be allowed into the Realms, and I really wonder what it is about his writing that caused that. It can't be just the fact that his quote-unquote heroes all walk a dark line. We've seen that tons and tons of times before. So it's like if you take that away, all there is really good writing. So I don't understand that. I don't get what's going on there. And I can't wait to read the rest of this trilogy to see where it goes, especially considering the ending. But we're going to have to wait a little longer than intended, simply because, a little bit of housekeeping here. Turns out that some of the books aren't included on the timeline in the main page that I'm using. I just happened to kind of take a look at it here, and I was trying to kind of sort the books on my shelves and everything so I'd have them in order. And I had a couple that I realized I don't see these on here, so I looked them up, and like for instance, Obsidian Ridge appears to take place ending in 1366, which is long before where we are now. So I got to go read that and a couple of others that take place beforehand. If you notice anything else that I've skipped that you feel should be taking place sooner than anything we've talked about, please let me know as soon as possible, and I'll try to fit that in there. The entire point is to kind of read these in order so they feel in, chronological. Obviously, I'm not worried about that an extreme amount, but I'm trying as much as I can to stick with that basic drive for the entire project. So again, if you notice anything, let me know. So far, the only thing that I know that we've skipped was an intentional skip, and that was Council of Blades by Paul Kidd, which I just could not find anywhere, and I don't know, it didn't look interesting enough for me to buy it. And so that's kind of how my system goes, is I use the library or other people I know nearby's libraries, and then if not that, I'll generally buy it. Enough housekeeping. So Alabaster Staff, really interesting read, especially for aspiring writers and aspiring editors, I think. Twilight Falling, just incredible from beginning to end. There's one section that I remember skipping when I first read it, and I skipped it again this time, and it's Erebus like walking through town and thinking about leaving his old past behind, and it just felt like that wasn't necessary. I think it's about 3 pages through the entire book. That's it. I still felt the same way. Everybody's allowed 3 pages of filler, at least. I mean, come on. But yeah, overall, Thinking Man's action, I don't think it's necessarily quite on par with like the Malazan stuff, but I've only read part 1 of his first trilogy so far. It could be that this is going to get way more intense and way deeper, so I wouldn't count that possibility out. Alright everybody, thanks for listening. This is Michael T. Bradley, Realms Remembered.